You know it's bad.
Today we have Jane Weil. Jane Weil has worked at Restorative Resources since 2009. She received her MSW from UC Berkeley and has worked with youth and adults in a variety of schools, medical facilities, and agencies providing social, mental health, and mediation services. At Restorative Resources, Jane combines her strong interests in working with youth and their families with a dedication to social justice and supporting the rights and interests of all members of the community. She has served on several school boards, both public and private as well. So please give a warm welcome to Jane.
Good morning. Nice to see those of you who are out and risking whatever's going on in the world here, but welcome. As she said, my name is Jane Weil. I am currently the Director of Training and Programs at Restorative Resources. And I have, as she said, I've been there for about 10 years and I feel really passionate about the work. So one of the reasons I have stayed as long as I have, it's pretty amazing work. Restorative Resources has been in this county since 2001. It's an independent nonprofit. We're based in Santa Rosa. We serve Sonoma County. And we're all about restorative justice and restorative practices. We work under contract with juvenile probation. We have done some adult work as well for the adult courts, and we've been funded with various local, state, and federal contracts over time, as well as some donors and foundations. We've been a Tier 1 upstreams evidence-based practice, which means that there is a restorative justice program, and we adhere faithfully to that and have been recognized to do so. And we have a training program where we train volunteers who work with us in the work that we do. We have trained folks who work in schools, teachers, administrators, and a variety of different people. We provide a variety of different restorative programs. A lot of what we do, we start out with the word restorative, but we have restorative dialogue groups, which are collections of people for various reasons who we gather together to help build relationships, build connection, build community. Restorative practices are really characterized by a couple of types of jobs. We are facilitators of conversations and we are circle keepers. So a lot of the work we do is in circle. So circle dialogues are an opportunity for people to come together, share their stories, tell what's true for them, hear from each other. We do a lot of listening and a lot of sharing, and use that as a way to find our connection with each other, to build positive relationships. And when there are problems or when there is a conflict, it's a good vehicle for sitting and talking with each other. The circle is especially useful as a vehicle to sit with equity of voice. Everybody has a voice. There is not one person who's more dominant than the other, including the circle keeper who keeps the space, holds that safety about the space, but helps to create dialogue among people. We do restorative conferencing. Restorative conferencing is one of the sort of higher level processes for conflict management. So restorative conferencing is used when somebody has caused an incident of harm and other people have been impacted by that. It's an opportunity to bring people together, all those stakeholders who have been affected by an incident of harm, to bring people together to talk about what happened in a facilitated way and look for ways to make things as right as possible. We have accountability circles, which are something of a combination of those first two, the dialogue and the restorative accountability circles are generally used with youth who have already committed some incident of harm, made some choice that was harmful to other people, and need some time with peers to find their accountability, to come into that place of feeling responsible. In the midst of that program, we have a restorative conference. One of the outcomes of a restorative conference is that we make an amends plan. And so in that accountability circle, we also monitor youth to make sure they complete that plan and complete the restoring of relationship that's possible. We do re-entry conferences. So we hold some of our dialogue groups in juvenile hall. We hold some of them in school settings, in continuation schools. And so at that point where expelled students want to return to district or incarcerated youth return to the community, we can offer a re-entry conference so that we can talk about what are the needs now, what are there harms from the past that need to be resolved before coming back into the community? Do we just need to talk about how to live in good relationship coming back into a family, a community, a school, wherever. We have done some work with adults, with primarily young adults, and continue to do so on occasion. And we have community circles. And I want to talk a little bit more about the different kinds of cases that we've seen and reasons that we gather in these different situations. Since 2001, we have done hundreds and hundreds of cases, probably thousands of cases. We get referrals from the Juvenile Justice Department. We get referrals from schools. And the cases that we see in those situations, we've seen classroom disruptions, attendance issues, and truancy issues, bullying, both in school, not in school, social media, a variety of settings, hate crimes, vandalism, graffiti, assault and battery, weapons, burglary and theft, and all the way up to vehicle code violations, some of which are minor vehicle code violations, and we have done some vehicular manslaughter cases where there has been great harm, and the hope to try and repair harm isn't really possible, but we can at least work towards finding some amount of healing for people involved. Community circles that we hold, there are a variety of types. There are those that are relationship building. We have taught teachers in classrooms how to hold circle in school where kids can come together and get to know each other, share stories with each other when there isn't conflict, so that they have a vehicle to use when there is conflict. They have a sense of how the circle works, the safety of the space, the purpose of the facilitator or the circle keeper, and they're able to find ways to manage conflict in that way. We've also held circles for things like community members and law enforcement to bring people together to help build understanding, so that people have a better understanding of what each other's needs are, what the considerations are, and have an opportunity to speak in circle with that sense of equity of voice and to share stories and build understanding. We've worked with neighbor conflicts. We've done those sorts of circles. We've also had circles that are in response to various community crises, and healing circles. During the fires, we held a lot of circles, some in classrooms and some not, with kids who had been deeply impacted by fires, who had seen a lot of really difficult things and needed a place to process that information. So they can sit in circle and talk about their stories and find out that other people are feeling the same kinds of things, that they're not alone, that they're more like each other than maybe they knew, and build that understanding and build empathy. So I want to talk a little bit about what is restorative justice. And this is a quote from Howard Zare, one of the founding fathers of restorative justice. It's his words: restorative justice is a process to involve, to the extent possible, those who have a stake in a specific wrongdoing, to collectively identify and address harms, needs, and obligations in order to heal and put things as right as possible. So it is a process. When we begin working with people, there is a lot of pre-work that we do with different stakeholders in a situation to help them get ready to find their place of accountability, to be willing to own the choices that they made, and be willing to hear from other people what it's been like for them, or for those who've been impacted, for them to find sort of process, what are their needs, what would it take to make things better. Sometimes it helps to look at how the traditional justice system views justice as opposed to how restorative justice looks at restoring justice. The traditional justice system, which is also sometimes considered the criminal justice system, an adversarial system, the two systems ask different questions. And in the traditional justice system, misbehavior is defined as a violation of law or school rules. And I often, when I sit down and meet with a new client and talk to them about, do you know why you're here, how you got here? It's often a probation referral. And they've often been in the courtroom or whatever and have been told what they did wrong and what law they broke. And I like to emphasize that in restorative justice that matters, but what really matters is that there were people involved and there were relationships involved, and that we're here to talk about how what they did affected people. There may be a law, and that may be there for a really good reason. Generally it is, but sometimes we lose track of that there are human connections and humans that have been affected by what they did. In the traditional system, violations create guilt. We look for guilt and innocence. And in restorative justice, we feel like violations create an obligation. Sometimes I say to kids, if you're walking down the hall in school, most of the kids are high school and middle school, if you're walking down the hall and you bump into somebody and their books fall or their cell phone falls or whatever, you probably are going to stop and say, oh, I'm sorry, and help them gather up the stuff that you bumped and help them spill. That's sort of an obligation for something that you've done to somebody that may have been unintended. If it's intended, the same holds true, that if you harm somebody, you have an obligation to try and help fix it. In the traditional justice model, restored justice requires a determination of guilt and punishment. And we're all pretty hardwired that way. We think if we've done something wrong, we're supposed to be punished for it. And restorative justice really looks at inviting the person who did the wrong into accountability, to own what they did, and to look at what the needs are of those who were harmed, and to look at what can be done to repair those harms. In the traditional system, accountability is defined in terms of receiving punishment, and in the restorative justice model, it involves really understanding the impacts of the actions and taking responsibility for those choices, which is a huge learning process. When we've done something wrong, we deserve the right to learn what we did and how we affected other people, so that we can make that choice to fix it, or to do what we can to fix it. We all make mistakes, we all do things. Life is a process of learning, and this is no different. In the traditional justice system, the focus and the outcome are that the offender gets what they deserve. In the restorative justice model, it's an opportunity for people who've been impacted to be heard, to have a say in what happens because of what that incident was. The wrongdoer has that opportunity to learn, to grow, to address those harms, and to do what we can to prevent future offending, which is an important part of that. So restorative justice approaches wrongdoing with some sort of standard questions. You can go anywhere in the world and learn about restorative justice, and you'll see these same basic questions. And they're formulated pretty specifically to ask, from your point of view, what happened? And everybody in the process is asked the same thing, that, when I was little, I thought there was truth with a big capital T, and that was what it was. But there isn't, there isn't. That what you see from your vantage point and what somebody else sees from their vantage point may be different, and both may be true. What you experienced and what somebody else experienced may be very different in the same incident, and both may be true. So it's an opportunity to ask from your perspective what happened. And that can be asked of the wrongdoer, the direct victim, the law enforcement or first responders who show up, family members. Everybody's had a different experience. When we ask, what were you thinking and feeling at the time, notice we don't ask, why did you do it? Ask a young person or an older person or anybody in the seat of having made a poor choice or behaved in a way that was harmful to others. We don't ask why, because most of the time the answer is, I don't know why I did that. But to ask what they were thinking at the time or what they were feeling at the time, to invite them to slow down and think about what was going on with them, to reflect about that, is a moment, it's an opportunity for learning. It's an opportunity to say, oh, I had these feelings and that's why I punched you. It gives them the opportunity to say, okay, when I feel that way, to begin to learn that, I can choose a different response, and become more aware of what they're doing. And then when we move on to ask, how have you or others been affected by this, that additionally adds to their opportunity to make a choice. They come to understand what somebody else's experience was. That builds awareness and understanding, and ultimately it builds empathy between people, which helps us make choices that are thoughtful and considerate of other people. We ask, what has been the hardest thing for you, in an invitation to kind of focus on, among all these things, what's really been the hardest. And interestingly, it's not always the things that they've already been talking about how they've been impacted. And then what needs to happen to make things right, or as right as possible. As a group, generally, we look at that question together, and come up with some approaches to healing the harm. Restorative practices, restorative justice. There are a number of different tools within those practices, going from very informal, that don't take a lot of time, to those that are much more formal, that take quite a lot of time in preparation. We can start with learning affective statements, those statements that say, I felt, I feel, whatever I feel, when such and such a thing happens. And that can be taught to kindergartners. Kindergartners can learn to say, when you took the ball from me, I was really upset. I was playing with it. And I've heard stories of this being taught and handled on school campuses, where kids begin to use their language about, instead of, you stole my ball, to be able to say, I was playing with that ball and I would like to have it back. And then there can be a conversation. Oh, I didn't know that you were playing with it. It rolled across the playground over here to me. And it can be a really quick approach that's sort of feeling based, personal responsibility about how you feel and what you need. Those are really quick and simple. We hear about young people in high school who were disruptive in class, and when the teacher has been trained and can say to them, what just happened? How do you think this is affecting your classroom? What could you do right now to kind of help me bring order back into class? And it can be quick, boom. People feel respected, they feel seen and heard, and sometimes people are able to move on pretty quickly. And we can hold circles in classrooms or in community, as we talked about earlier, where people can sit in a circle. Generally, our circles have no furniture in the middle. We don't We try not to have desks to hide behind or things that we can, hide our cell phones under or ways to put a barrier between us and other people. We like a circle that's chairs in a circle. Sometimes we have a centerpiece that's a focal point that people can look at if they're uncomfortable, or that defines the space and holds the space, where we can share thoughts and feelings and listen to each other. We often use a talking piece, which we ask that people respect when we're using it, so that whoever's holding the piece has the floor. And if they need to take a long time to find their thoughts and to put into words what they want to say, they have the floor while they're holding that talking piece. And everybody else has that opportunity to listen. And when they're done, it moves on to the next person. People have an opportunity to pass if they don't want to share. But classrooms can use these tools to approach even thorny subjects. Maybe there's been a rash of people not treating each other well, and a teacher can bring a group together and say, maybe start with a question: has anybody ever felt bullied before? And that goes around and everybody has a chance to speak to that. Has anybody ever felt like they've been a bully before? Everybody has a chance to talk about that. And without having to single out somebody, there are ways of beginning to address some of those difficult issues. Becoming a little more formal, accountability circles, I talked about that. Those are generally peer circles with youth who have been, for us, youth who have been referred to us by school or probation for an incident of harm, where we can talk about the harms and the incident, but we can also talk about choices that we're making in life, our values. What does certain things mean? What does respect mean? Does respect mean that you're afraid of me? Does respect mean that you understand that I have needs and you're willing to give me space for my needs, and I'm willing to give you space for your needs? And we kind of break it down. What is an apology? First, you need to hear what harm you caused before you can apologize. Say to the kids sometimes, do you have siblings? Has your parent ever said to you, there's some scuffle, it's like, say you're sorry, okay, you're over. Well, half the time you don't know why you're apologizing. Right? You don't know that triggered something in me, or it's like I said a nasty thing, but that sent me off on a whole other thing. So sometimes I want the opportunity to say what that was that hurt me before somebody can say something that's a meaningful apology. We talk about things like that in accountability circles. And then there's the most formal of our process is the restorative conference. It's more structured. It takes more time to prepare people, depending on how emotionally involved or how difficult the situation is. It can take time to be ready to bring people together. Excuse me. So the restorative conference, that's my main role. I see our more serious cases for the most part. I see a lot of the felony cases that are referred to us. Most of those are referred for a restorative conference. And so a restorative conference it's a facilitated meeting that is inclusive of all stakeholders, all people who have been impacted, who choose to be there. It is, generally speaking, a face-to-face dialogue. Sometimes it includes wrongdoer, their family, those who've been impacted directly, indirectly, first responders, law enforcement, community members, importantly. And we don't come to conference until the wrongdoer is in a place where they can say, yes, I did this. I take responsibility for it. And I feel badly about it. I feel like I want to make things right. So it's important that we all come to that meeting with a positive intent, an intent to find healing. The same is true of those who have been impacted. And I have met with people who are impacted directly who are looking to come together simply for revenge. But that doesn't really work. And so we can't get to a place of this is a forum where we're trying to find a way to heal harm. then we don't go forward, because as a facilitator, it's my job to make sure that that's safe, that space will be safe for everybody, that people are coming with an intent to find their way through this very difficult situation into a better place. It happens in a circle format. We have guidelines that help us keep it safe. We ask that everybody speak their truth from the heart, that they listen openly, and that they maintain some confidentiality. That we explore impacts. They may be physical impacts, they may be emotional, they may be financial. Whatever the impacts have been, we want to explore those. And we, once we have gained a good understanding of what happened and what the harms were, what the impacts for that were, then we can look at making amends to the extent possible. In most cases, there are at least some things that can be done that move us in a direction of acknowledging somebody else's pain or harms or impacts, and something can often be done to address that. In terms of why people choose to participate, different parties, different perspectives need different things from this experience. Impacted parties often need information. I've had cases where a young person broke into somebody's house and the house owner wanted to know how they got in. How can I protect my house better? How did you find your way into my house? I thought I locked all my doors. I had a youth who did a lot of graffiti, and the man said, my building gets hit with graffiti all the time. What would stop you and others like you from hitting my building? And the young person said, put up a lot of lights. We don't want to work under lights. If your building is well lit, we're going to go find someplace else where it's dark. So that's an opportunity for people who've been impacted. Truth telling. Sometimes people just really want to know what happened. They can't believe something like this happened, and they want to know the backstory. They want to know. We're curious. Our brains sometimes want to make sense of it. People want to feel empowered. They want to regain a sense of control in their lives. And sometimes that's like, I want you who did this to me to hear from me, hear about how that was for me. It seems to be sort of an underappreciated and pretty consistent thing. People want to be heard. And they want that acknowledgement of the person who caused that harm to let them know that this is what you did to me. This is how I felt about it. People also want to put a face on whatever happened. In this case where somebody broke into a house, there were kids in the house, and the kids were having trouble sleeping at night, and they were imagining monsters, or, or whatever. And to have the opportunity to see who it was who was in your house and rifling through your stuff. Generally speaking, when we face our fears, when we see or when we name our fears, they tend to take a smaller space in our minds than when we're just imagining. So for some people, it's about being able to put a face on somebody. Vindication, sort of an acknowledgement from somebody else that, yes, I'm validating that something happened to you, and I was the cause of that, and that was real, and that really helps some people. And then there's restitution. Often there's money involved, and sorting out what money needs to be repaid is something also that we can do. What do wrongdoers get out of these situations? Accountability. Accountability is important. We live in a culture where we don't like to take accountability. We always want to blame somebody else. But there's a huge amount of power in being accountable. I find people often feel a lot of shame over what they've done. And they hide that shame, and it kind of festers and it eats at people, and they don't feel fully seen. They feel like, I'm really not this good person that you say I am. I have this dirty little secret or whatever. And so being accountable, we really coach people. Be accountable. Own what you did. It's the first step in being able to fix it. Take responsibility, face it. It's a very maturing kind of situation. Encouraging personal transformation. I think when young people sit in a room face to face with somebody that they've hurt and they face them and they listen to them, they gain understanding, they gain empathy. That's maturity. That's what it is that we are striving for as we grow, to be in a place where we can understand that we have meaning in this world, and our meaning, we can use that in a negative way or in a positive way, but that what we do affects other people, and we get to choose whether we're trying to affect them in positive or negative ways. So we bring a lot of encouragement to go through this difficult process, because at the other end, we're offering a lot of support for people who want to make changes and try and learn new ways of doing that. There's a lot of support to be had. And being reintegrated into society. I had a case where an officer came to our conference, and we kind of got through to the other side, and as we were leaving, the officer said to the young person, "We live in a small town, and I will see you on the streets again. We're going to see each other. We're in the same community. How I see you will be your choice. If you look away from me, you cross the street, you avoid me, I'm going to kind of guess you're doing something that you don't want me to know about. If you come up to me, shake my hand, say, I remember you, I was in that conference with you, how are you doing? I'm going to assume that you are living at peace in yourself and that you have nothing to hide." And that's rebuilding relationship, and that's a choice that becomes possible when we meet with each other and face what we've done and try and heal those harms. We always have community members in our conferences. We train people to understand that role. Sometimes there are actually community members who were impacted and in a direct way, but community always has an interest and is always an impacted party in one way or another. Community likes to feel a sense of safety in the community, and for them as well to be able to put a face on who was it that was in the park that night breaking into cars? Oh, that was you. Okay, well, my car was there and I had these things in my car, or I don't go to that park anymore because I read stories about this. That matters to me. I don't walk in the park anymore because I know there has been crime in this park, whatever. So it's an opportunity for community members to come and say, we're all connected, and what you do impacts people you don't know, like me. Community members can be heard. They can ask questions. They can try and gain some understanding of what's going on. And I've heard more than one community member say to a young person, you are our future. Someday, you are going to be making laws that affect me. You are going to be serving me in a bar. You are going to be selling me my groceries, and I want you to be the best you can be. I'm invested in this. So it's an opportunity to build community and to do problem solving, to find, if you're not your best right now, what can we do to support you being in a better place? And it's an opportunity for community members to share values, to share what is it about our community that we really care about and value. How do we keep that going? How do we build a sense of connection among us so that we feel like we're all kind of in this together? The outcome of a conference, after we've talked about impacts and what happened and impacts for it, we look at making agreements. And agreements we can be very creative about those. They can be very straightforward. We have kids write a lot of apology letters. And we help them with those because apologies are pretty specific. They're not a time to necessarily ask for forgiveness. It's not an asking time, it's a giving time to make an apology. Often young people do community service to give back to their community. We hope and try to make that meaningful. I would say in some of our most severe cases, we've done some vehicular manslaughter cases where young people can put together some words that they can share in school assemblies at driver's ed classes, and every 15 minutes at other kinds of public gatherings where they can share lessons learned. You know, young people are more likely to listen to other young people than they are to listen to people they don't know, older people. And they can be a very powerful voice in those settings. We address preventing future wrongdoing. I held a conference the other night with a young person who had destroyed some property, and he had done it during school time when he wasn't in school. And as it turns out, he's not in school much, and he's truant. And so we brought that piece into the picture too. What's going on? Why aren't you in school? What do you need to be able to be in school and to make that more successful? And we came up with some plans and some ideas for that we hope will prevent some of the offending he's doing now by hanging out and doing nothing that's particularly productive. And we also try hard to involve outside support. If we can reconnect a young person with their coach or a band teacher or the Boys and Girls Club or someplace where they feel like they have an opportunity to have a mentor in their life or become a mentor to a younger person, a big brother, a big sister, whatever, anything that helps somebody feel that they are behaving as their best self is preventive, is you know, an opportunity to sort of improve situations and help people feel more successful in their lives. So I would say, sort of overall, there are a lot of benefits to this process. It gives everybody a voice. Sort of go back and say, you know, often when I meet people who have been through the court process and they come in and they say, well, the victim was there, but my attorney advised me not to look them in the eye, not to go up to them afterwards and say something because I don't know what they're going through or whatever. And I so often find that people's natural instinct is to do what's right, to be able to kind of go up to somebody and say, I'm so sorry for what happened. And our legal system, in some ways, because everybody has representation and everybody's trying to promote their own best outcome, sometimes that's in conflict with people's natural instinct to say, hey, I really don't feel good about what happened and I want to apologize. So this is an opportunity for people to kind of come together face to face, talk to each other, understand each other, build some empathy between each other. It promotes healing. It allows for all of us to learn and grow, build relationships. And in the end, it often, I think it's hard to find statistics, but we believe it reduces recidivism, that people become more engaged in their lives and more reflective and understanding of the choices that they're making. And that's our hope, that people have enough information and understanding and empathy and connectedness to each other that they make choices not to hurt each other. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I'm happy to answer questions in a bit, but I'd like to show, we have about a 15-minute video that interviews some of the young people we worked with and some of the volunteers we worked with, and I would like to share that at this point. I can figure out how to. I'm going to give it a good try, but I appreciate having help by my side there. And I think we've got it.
Restorative justice is a concept that goes back to early African civilization, Native American tribes, and the native Maori in New Zealand. The symbol of restorative justice is the circle, a safe haven where people can sit down face to face and work out their problems. It's an alternative to the traditional justice system and school discipline procedures where the focus often is on blame and punishment. With restorative justice, when an offender commits a crime or a school violation, he creates an obligation to the victim and the community to restore the broken relationships and heal the harms. It's a place where the victim has a voice and can describe exactly how they've been impacted. It's also a place where the offender is held accountable and the focus is on healing and preventing reoffending. Restorative Resources started back in 2001 as a community-based nonprofit organization. Since then, we've facilitated hundreds of cases, working with Sonoma County Probation Department, schools, law enforcement, and families to pioneer the growing field of restorative justice. We like to call it justice through community, where justice is a choice we make together as a community.
Here are the universal questions that form the foundation of restorative programs all around the world.
At the restorative conference, the youth sits down in a face-to-face meeting that lasts for about 2 hours. And they're meeting with all the people that they've impacted. And those people are the victims and the community members and school teachers, principals, law enforcement, and families. So everyone at that conference gets a chance to speak and be heard and to share how they've been impacted by the incident of wrongdoing. And importantly, the victim gets a chance to tell their story, to tell the story of how their life has been affected by the young man's behaviors. And this chance to tell their story can be quite important for the victim's healing.
We all got to know each other. We put a name to the face. So it wasn't just some random neighborhood guy where the random crime happened. It was, hey, I'm your neighbor, and we all want to live in the same neighborhood, and we run into each other at the donut shop. I mean, we all sat down and realized that we all live in the same neighborhood together.
I think it was really important for us to sit down with the young man, and so we can all put our feelings out there and put everything on the table, and in hopes that there's no hard feelings, and we can help him get going in the right direction, and we can all put this behind us.
And it's in this face-to-face dialogue at this restorative conference that the youth gets to really understand the full and deeper impact of how his actions have affected others.
Nobody knows more about how this program changes lives than the offenders who are given a second chance. With our help and their willingness to step up and be accountable, they are pulled back into our community that at one time only wanted to push them away or lock them up.
When you're in court, it's like, you're a criminal, you've done bad, here's your punishment. It's not like, why did you do this? What kind of person, what led up to this? What's going on in your life to make you do this? What can you learn from doing this? Who was affected? And they see a person, not like a vandal or a felon. They see a person. That's the cool part. They actually listen to you and listen to your opinions.
In 2012, Restorative Resources received a federal grant to develop the Accountability Circles program. It was designed as a rite of passage to help prepare the youth for the restorative conference, surround them with peers for support in accepting responsibility, and completing the plans they developed in the restorative conference.
The offender has to own the wrongdoing. The community and the victim show up and present with what's present for them because of the wrongdoing, and then we try to find our way to make it right.
In this way, we promote that this healing is as a process that we comprise the society and put it together again.
It's more of I would say, a weaving back together of what's been severed or wasn't even there to begin with. It's beginning to connect the hearts and the people that are involved, and that includes community.
In all the years that I have been working in the juvenile justice system and the criminal justice system, restorative justice was the only thing that I saw that really had a chance of working for all the participants to experience some kind of positive outcome. Getting the word out that, you know, there may be a better way, and take a close look, and we can save money, and our kids might be better served, and our community may be better served. Making that case is important. And I think that's what it's going to take.
As it got later and later, it started to kind of change. Like, next thing you know, they were trying to run us out from the street, but people didn't want to go. Our friend got hit like a couple times. So that's kind of more where I decided to kind of throw a rock. They did charge me with assault with a deadly weapon. That's when they told me, you have a choice. Either you go through this restorative program, or you're gonna just go through the court and then you probably go to juvie. I remember when I was done with this program and I was done with my friends and all that, I actually I threw away all my clothes. If I look back to what I was 7 years ago, man, it doesn't even compare. I'm actually happy that I moved on and I left that life back, and I'm really proud of myself. And I know my mom is, because whenever she sees me, she's always happy.
We also have a restorative conferencing program for young adults, where we get referrals from the DA's office and county criminal court judges to help transform adult offenders into responsible community members.
I had just had my daughter, and I also just lost my job at the time, and I felt like going into the store and shoplifting was the way I was going to provide clothing for her and for myself at that time.
I got in a fight with my uncle, so I was charged with 2 charges, one of vandalism and one of battery on a person.
They usually have committed more than one misdemeanor. They're usually between the ages of 18 and 25. So they're not diversion. So they don't really get, there's no program for them. If they were juveniles, if they were 17 and under, they would be part of the juvenile justice system, which has some restorative, some rehabilitative aspects of it. But now they're in the adult criminal system, which is primarily punitive.
If you deal with people that are between 18, 25, and you give them an opportunity to grow, to get cleaned up, to make amends with the people that they've hurt, to reintegrate themselves with their family if they have one around, then you can bridge that gap between 18 and early, you can bridge that early adult gap and get to the point where people just kind of tend to stay out of trouble.
They were able to help me to process with why I had done the things that I had done. And that was really helpful to think about things instead of just pushing them away like I had over the years, just not thinking about it. And so bringing it up, it was emotional, but it was a good thing. I was able to really deal with the things that I put away.
One of the things that makes us different from other programs is that we have volunteers from the community who lead the restorative conferences and teams we call restorative councils.
I think the more I was drawn in, the more I began to work with it, the more it spoke to me from just a human standpoint.
I'm attracted to it because as a father, I have 2 daughters. I think children, the youth of our community need elders to offer guidance to them.
So when a offender or a victim comes to one of these processes, they're sitting down with their fellow community members, which is very impactful. We hear that time and again, how folks are so grateful that community members are here, that They're giving their time, stepping up to make their community safer and stronger. So volunteers are at the very heart of what we do.
The neat thing about this program is that it has community members from various walks of life, which creates different voices that you hear, from different backgrounds, and it's because it does represent the community.
If you don't like the way that things are going or the things that are happening in your community now, this is the place to be. You have the opportunity to make a change.
When we get to the face-to-face, and when the kid gets to hear how what he did impacted someone who's volunteering their time to be there, is very powerful. And I would say 99% of the time, the kids go inward and they're able to reflect back and go, wow, I didn't realize.
I didn't know it would be like volunteers from the community that would be coming in and taking their time, just kind of like telling me how their life was and how they've been through struggles and they came through it and they made mistakes too. And that was very reassuring to have that person next to you.
Here in Sonoma County, we're working in schools with students, teachers, parents, and administrators to create a restorative culture. An environment where repairing the harm and building relationships is the norm instead of the alternative.
When students have done something that just doesn't work in the school community, whatever that may be, suspension was the only answer that we thought of. You go home and think about it, or see you in 3 to 5 days, and when you come back, you come back.
Now the administrators have the opportunity to make real changes in the student's behavior, where they can say, this is what occurred, and this is what these are the consequences, but let's look at the situation and maybe come to an understanding of it. So you don't get suspended from school, because when kids are suspended from the classroom or suspended from school, there's no benefit to them whatsoever.
It was kind of like nerve-wracking at first, but then as we started going to the program more often, I got used to it, like talking to more people, and I started learning new things about how to solve problems a different way.
And what I really like about this program is the kids, they're not coming here to make excuses for what they did. They're coming into this knowing that they made a mistake, they want to make it better, they're owning up to what they did.
The impact of restorative justice for Santa Rosa schools has been astounding. The most important factor in my mind is that we have had one suspended expulsion or expulsion hearing make it to the board in this school year. Last year there were 60 at this time. A year ago before that there were 120 before the board. So if you think in 1 year we reduced it by 50%, and then we've gone from 60 to 1 in this last year, it's really astounding.
Yay, technology. Right. So we probably have a little bit of time left if anybody wanted to ask a question. I failed earlier to introduce Veronica Cruz, who's our administrative director right now. I also want to say a couple things. The video I think is awesome, but it's a little dated. Most of it is still true and accurate. Some of the programs have kind of waxed and waned over time, but I think it gives a really good idea of the human beings involved and some of the processes. I also want to mention that there are a couple of things up here on this front desk. If anybody's interested in hearing more about us or staying in touch with us, we have a sign-up sheet up here. We have our business cards are up here, and then some swag, a little bit of stuff. Also, let me just, the other thing in the video, it talks a lot about, uses the male pronoun often. When we first designed the Accountability Circle program, it was for young men. That changed after the first year. That was just where the funding was at the beginning. So a lot of the conversation is when he this and when he that and all that. We see young females as well.
That was actually something that I was going to ask, because as we know, in the whole field of criminal justice, we're trying to have more evidence-based practices, which you spoke to, but gender-responsive practices. And I wanted to know if you could say something about how that is evolving in restorative justice. We're looking at different kinds of offenders.
I've seen a shift in the time that I've been there, not necessarily one that I would hope to see, but I see a lot more violent behavior from females than I ever used to. I have not seen many female graffiti artists, although I've seen quite a few male. But I would say in the assault and battery category, we still see more males than females, but unfortunately that's evening out. I think the bullying and the social media stuff, there is a lot going on there now. It's a really big problem, I think, for young people to make their way through school without being really damaged by all the various ways there are to harass each other. Yeah, I would agree. And something I was going to say to that. People don't take what they post all that seriously, and we all don't necessarily. But in fact, we are using federal airways. Those airways cross state lines. So when a young person posts a picture of themselves with a toy gun or a real gun and says, "Don't come to school tomorrow," the SWAT team shows up at their house. School gets closed. It's a big, big deal. So, I mean, I think we've seen real waves of different kinds of things that are being noticed in the community. I think we're very sensitive right now about threats against people or mass threats. Those kinds of things are taken very seriously. You know, I keep bringing up the graffiti thing because I had a year, it's been some years now, where I had 4 or 5, and one was a $20,000 of damage and $14,000 in damage, and you know, so that seemed to be a wave at one point. But I do think that the use of social media to bully and harass, sexting, various different kinds of things, we've seen more of that.
So would it be your sense that, given that we're in this, for those of us like myself who are a bit older, it's the brave new world of social media, that it's more important than ever to have face-to-face sitting there in the circle talking about, okay, this is what you said, this is what happened. And would you like replay the video that might, or the tweet that might be part of that? How would that be part of that?
Yeah, I think it's always important to have FaceTime and face-to-face time. I think we would never do to a person that we were in the same room with something that we might do to them behind a screen. So, it seems like, yeah, we have to be really mindful that there are people on the other side of, these are not just a handle or an email address or a Twitter account. It's a person on the other side of that.
That we're all connected and it ripples out. And because you're on, it's not keeping it just, you're sending it out there and tossing it out there. It is affecting and rippling out to people you can't even imagine. I think that's one of the big things they realize in Circle when they talk about what happened, is that they didn't realize how many people they affected by what they did. And then they learn to, how can I fix this? How can I address this? And I think that connectedness didn't cross their mind. Or social media, it's kind of ironic that social media is connecting us all, but they're not seeing how it can hurt people on the other side, or how far it goes out.
So they're not understanding the scope, but they're not following the impact of it. So it would take for people who are impacted talking about it face to face. This is how it impacted me.
Right. And we talk sometimes about trust and broken trust. I've seen girls who chose to send some naked photo of themselves to their boyfriend, and they break up, and the boyfriend has that and can send it around. And we are putting all those pieces together. We are honoring each other and respecting each other in some of those settings. And so, yeah, when we come together and people talk about, I did that, and yeah, I did that, and hey, that happened to me. And they get to share those stories and what that was like for them. That all helps us to make, our human behavior more real. So I think I totally moved away from the question about, are we seeing more females than we used to or whatever?
Traditionally based practice of being face-to-face and talking about community arms and focusing on reconciliation and accountability and what do parties need to be made whole. But here we are in the tech world where someone who's never been on social media can be influenced by someone social media all the time, may not realize they're hurting themselves. I think because sexting, I realizing we could be charged at 16-year-olds with violations, for paying child support, even though they're a child.
Right.
They don't realize they're hurting themselves.
And people are doing it naively too. I had a couple of years ago, I had a group of 6 high school boys who were together after school, waiting till sports practice. So they were hanging out, getting a snack, chatting with each other. Somebody had a new girl he was talking with. And one of the boys said to him, hey, I bet you couldn't get her to have sex with you. And the guy said, I bet I could. And they were off to the races, and there it was. And so the one texted, invited her over. The guy said, well, how are we going to know if it actually happened? And the guy said, well, I'm going to tell you. And they said, well, that's not going to be good enough. We're going to have to video record it. So before you know it, This girl comes over, they go into the bedroom, they've got a cell phone set up, and they're recording it. Afterwards, they showed enough to prove what had happened, and then he deleted it from his phone. Well, it went into his trash. It didn't leave his phone, it went into his trash. So somebody else looked at it. Oh, I think I still have it. Yeah, look at this is pretty funny. So we're also in a different world, because when I met with the girl, she and her mom came in, and she said, "It's not that big a deal to me." And her mom said, "Well, how can that not be a big deal to you, that everybody's talking about it and it was visible to other people?" And she said, "Oh, my generation, we live much more publicly than you do. I didn't do anything that my friends aren't doing. I'm not embarrassed about the choice I made. It wasn't that big a deal to me." So, I'm learning all the time too about, where people are. As it turned out, we had the conference. She wanted to be there with the 6 guys. She asked that none of the parents be there, so we honored that. We had one community member, a woman, come who could speak about how harmful it would have been to her, so that we gave voice to those feelings in case that girl couldn't do it. But in the end, they kind of worked out their thing, and she became our youngest volunteer. She said, "This was amazing. This whole process, I learned so much, I loved it, and I want to be a volunteer, and I want to sit in on conferences for younger kids," not her peers, but she did, and she made it her high school senior project, and she got really involved in the whole process, and it was an interesting learning experience for all of us. I still learning too. Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody have any other questions, or anybody want to come up and have a poster or we have the cards are we have some of the cards that are the restorative questions, and some have like circle topic ideas, so that if you're in a situation you want to try and run a circle, there's ideas. I kind of, when I first came to Restorative Resources, saw these posted here and there, and I saw the cards, and I didn't really pay much attention. Like, okay, I'm learning. I was a board member, and then I posted it on my refrigerator, and then something happened at home, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm gonna go to the fridge. I'm gonna grab my card, and I just sat down and I just kind of used it, and I read the questions. But it was interesting to me that the person, which happened to be my son, he was grown, we were having a discussion that was heated, and then I went to the questions, and immediately the questions didn't, there wasn't a blaming or shaming or anything. That the questions were so, how would you say? Open, non-judgmental. Yeah. And he was willing to really talk about more about how he was feeling. I felt like I got way farther with these questions, but they're handy, and they're here for kids. They're in Spanish and English, and they're here to give away. If you want a set, we have some. So help yourself.